Hello, and welcome back to Evil Genius Props. It's still spooky season. I gotta see somebody about that. It's still spooky season, so we're continuing on with our spooky builds. Again, we're doing some builds for a friend's haunt. In this case, one of the things he asked me for was some of his gravestones that he had seen better days. So he asked me if I could make him a couple new ones. In this case, we're making him one that has a bit of a spooky surprise and as well has some specific in-jokes between us that we're not going to explain in the video, but it'll make fun. It'll make sense to him, make sense to me, and that's the people who are important. This is a pretty simple build, and it's a technique that you've seen before probably if you've looked around, which is to make gravestones out of insulation foam. In this case, the pink insulation foam that you can get at just about any hardware store. And what we've done is take that and we're going to make that into a gravestone as well as some supports. The part that makes it fun is how you can customize it and what you can do around it. Instead of just a straight up tombstone like you might get at a store, you can do your own thing, have your own words, names, like I said, in-jokes, and maybe do a couple other little spooky things on top of that. Let's get started. So for this one, we're going to do, there's already this existing line, and we're going to just expand on that and use that for our length to be the top for our gravestone this time. And we're going to keep this piece handy as the base. We're going to have the top be broken off. So I think what we're going to do is have a nice curve, like this would have been the top. And then it broke. I don't need to follow this line exactly, but that's a general idea. So what we're going to do with this is use jigsaw just to cut this real quick, following roughly the line. This is mostly just for the design. I might change this a little bit more, drop it down some more, but it gets the idea across. So you can sort of see there, I just did a random little area off to the side. That actually looks a little clean. So what we're going to do with that is take a rasp and just rough that edge up. Do that to make it look more broken, cracked. So what I'm going to do now is use this point on the rasp to sort of draw in some cracks. As you can tell by the tire, it's post-apocalypse now. Actually, I'm using the laser cutter here. I'm using Phecda to go ahead and cut the epitaph for our gravestone. And frankly, it's doing a lot better job. I did a practice piece, and I could do that by hand. And it would take a long time, and it wouldn't be as clean. And I wouldn't get to use the cool font, because I wouldn't be able to replicate that easily with either a Dremel or a knife. So, we've got the laser cutter going. It's still going to be a little bit, but it's going to be a lot less time than if I was trying to do it myself. It is XPS foam, so this is not that different than using a hot wire cutter to cut it, except it's, computer controlled and all that. But it is nasty smells, and we don't want to have unscheduled laser eye surgery, so hence the protective equipment. So I got the garage door open, I got my mask on, I got my glasses on, and I gotta sit here while it prints just to make sure nothing, catches on fire. Alright, let's talk real quick about what just happened, which is to say, I was using the laser engraver to do the engraving, and as I mentioned, I did do a test cut. It worked out really well. Two things. First off, when it went bigger, it didn't cut as deeply. It's kind of almost honeycombed. But while I was going, hey, did that work well enough? I bumped it. I moved it. So I stopped it and I flipped it over. I used the other side. Same issue though. It's not particularly deep, but it's so probably when I apply monster mud to this, it's gonna get lost. But some parts of it are deeper. I think this is just partially the learning curve of learning a new tool, which is the Phecda for me. But I can at least use this as sort of guidelines and come back in with like an X-Acto knife and cut these out, or a hot knife, and make them a little bit deeper, just to see how well they hold up to the monster mud, so we don't completely lose them. This is a real shame though, and it's just because I was dumb. This actually wasn't working too poorly on this side, but now I had to flip it over and use the side there with the printing on it. Not a big deal, we're going to cover it with paint, but anyway, there we go. I'm going to get out of here because there's still some bad smell going. So what we've got here is a blend they call Monster Mud, and it is a mix of joint compound and exterior paint. In this case, I went with dry lock paint, which then is automatically going to make it waterproof. You want to mix that roughly 5 to 1. So 5 parts of the joint compound to 1 part of the paint. That's not exact, doesn't need to be only that. You can do, if you want to do a lighter one, you can do as light as 2 to 1. I'm probably at around 3 or 4 to 1. And then mix it with the drill and the attachment there. That just helps. You're not going to be able to mix this by hand. It's just too thick. It's not just a good idea. It is pretty much a necessity. But that lets you have a nice waterproof compound, and it's great if you want to make, in this case, foam look like stone. Great addition to use on any of our gravestone props. So I did a quick test on this side to see how it would work when covered with the monster mud, and it's definitely visible, and I could probably call it out with some paint, but I think it'll be easier just to do this. And here's what I found, is just scratching this with the X-Acto is enough to sort of clear it out and make it a little bit deeper. And I don't need to go that much deeper based on what our tests are showing on the other side. So I'm going to go ahead and just go through and clean those out with an X-Acto knife real quick. Since I had to flip this one over, we're going to try something else to do the cracks in it this time. What I did last time was just use the pointed edge of a rasp. It worked okay, but what I noticed is afterwards it didn't really produce the effect I wanted. So we'll try something else. In this case, it's a hot wire or hot knife. See if it's up to temperature. Alright, so we're just going to draw some sort of squiggly lines. What we don't want is it to look patterned. Alright, not too bad. And I think what we might do is actually apply a little bit, very little bit of selective acetone. So the hot wire worked really well, but these kind of look a little too smooth. So what we're going to do is take some acetone, stolen from my wife, and put that in my favorite jar, and we're just going to run it sort of right along the same marks, maybe a little bit around it. And the acetone should actually eat into the foam a little bit and make those edges not be quite so straight. And while it's out, one other thing I want to try to do is cut this edge, specifically trying to leave it ragged, like it broke. And same thing, we're going to take the acetone and just sort of run it along there. Get a more natural looking sort of wear pattern on that. You can see that's starting to eat a little bit, makes it look a little bit less like foam through there. All right, we're going to leave this and come back to it a little bit later. We've updated the lines, softened up that edge, fixed up on the engraving there. We're ready to go ahead and apply our monster mud on this side. This is the monster mud we mixed up earlier. It's been sitting around for a little bit, so it's gotten kind of thick. Since I ended up having to use the side with the writing on it, we're going to have to go back over this and do multiple coats. But I am still liking the way this is covering. Might need to dig some out in some of the deeper parts of some of the letters. Just because the thicker it is, the more likely it is to crack. This is dried up. I did a second coat on it. There's still some spots showing through and some discoloration, but I actually like that. It makes it look a little bit older, helps with that aging process. Next step though is going to be to fill in these letters so they're more viewable, more visible. So I'm just going to go over those with some black paint and paper towel just to make sure for some of these thinner parts that doesn't overflow too much. So we'll do that. I'm not going to do any black on these. We're going to get those with the aging that we do next. There we go. That's the lettering for that gravestone. We're going to go over this one a little bit and do some aging, try a couple ideas. Just sprayed a little bit of rubbing alcohol on and try to make it so that the paint doesn't necessarily adhere all that well everywhere. So I'm also going to cover this up with a little bit of some of the lighter colors. Cover up is the wrong term. I'm going to apply some of the lighter colors here. And a good part of that is just coming over and sort of covering up some of this, but not like painting over it, but almost blending. So some of these areas where maybe it looks a little bit too dark, go over with some of those with a watered down light color. If I do this before it's all completely dry, it just sort of smudges a little bit and looks a lot less like I just painted it on. We're going to let that all dry up, and then got one other thing to add on to that, but we're going to let this layer dry first. Aging's done on our gravestone. What we want to do is we're going to add a glow-in-the-dark paint. This is from Dark FX. And what we're going to do with that, because this goes on clear, you're not actually going to be able to see it. So I'm going to tape off the area I want to paint in, and then paint over that. And I also have a UV flashlight, so that as I paint it, I can see where it's going. So the idea here is, as this is going to stay outside, pick up lots of UV from the sun, and then as it gets darker, this will come out. We're going to need to do more than one coat. It does specify that in the instructions for this paint, and that's fine. We know that going in. We're just going to go ahead and apply some more here, let it dry, and we'll come back. The tombstone itself is decorated, done. Our signs, glow in the dark bit is there, but a little bit visible still, but we'll cover that up later when we seal it all over. One of the things I want to do with this though is put a nice base on this to help hold it upright, so it's not just this. So what I'm going to do is mount it to the base here. Probably going to trim this edge off just to give a nice smooth edge, probably on both sides. But I'm going to do this and then flip this around so you can see sort of how it would look from the back. Is once I've sort of mounted this, is actually drill a couple of holes through here and then attach some PVC pipe to it to help hold it in place, so I can mount it with some rebar in the ground so it doesn't go flying around so much. So with that in mind, what I want to do is figure out where I'm going to mount this first, and then before I put this, attach them together, drill the hole in the drill bit, on the drill press, so I can make that mount a little bit easier. So what I'm going to do is hold this in place. It's going to be a little bit skewed towards the front, so I've got room in the back. And just go through and mark this out. Put a little arrow on there just so I know which way is the front, just so I don't get things confused. And what I want to do is drill a couple of holes to put the PVC pipe through. So what I did was take the part where I drew it out, took a section of the PVC pipe and just pressed it in so I could sort of see where it was going to line up. Now I should be able to just slide that in, and then I'll have two holes to be able to hold the rebar in place. We're going to glue these in so they don't just slide off, but that's the main support hole. So because the glow-in-the-dark paint is water-based, I want to put a sealant over it. I actually emailed the company and asked what was a good way to protect it and make sure that wouldn't affect the UV qualities of it, and they suggested a epoxy resin over it. What I'm going to ultimately do is probably just do the whole thing in polyurethane, because the rest of this is also water-based. But specifically over this, I'm actually going to cover it with some UV resin just to make sure that it's nice and sealed. All right, well, we'll seal that, and then when that's done, come back and do the whole thing with some polyurethane. So we've got the pipe cut down and the holes drilled. We're going to go ahead and glue those in. Going to use the Gorilla Glue because it expands. will help hold those in place. And then I've got this marked out for where the tombstone itself sits. So I think what I'm going to do is, rather than risk getting monster mud on the finished part, I'm going to go ahead and paint around this after the glue is done, and then leave this open and glue that together once it's got the monster mud on it. But for now, our next step is just to attach these guys. Personally, I'm just really proud of myself that I remembered to put it on the glue mat. I went ahead and glued that onto the base, and as you can see here, I went ahead and actually glued along the pipe as well. So it's not just glued down at the bottom, but along the pipes here for the supports, help it keep a little more rigid. The next thing we need to do is just hit that with some polyurethane to seal in all the weathering and the paint, and it'll be good to go. So I'll do that, and then we'll come back and do a final wrap-up. And here's the finished project. Got a nice support, good aging, weather sealed, so it should be good to stay outside. Supports ready for some rebar to go through to hold them in place. Glow-in-the-dark surprise. Overall, I'm happy with how this turned out. I got to learn a few new things on this one, including how to use the laser cutter engraver on the foam to do the lettering. I could have done this by hand. It would have taken longer and might not have come out as well. Learned new on the glow-in-the-dark paint, which did not entirely turn out the way I wanted it to. I wanted that to just be clear. Something interacted when I applied the UV resin. Like, this parts of it are perfect. This is sort of what I wanted. It's just not visible. These parts did come through. I think I just need to play with those a little bit more. That was a new material for me. If I can figure out how to get that consistent one way or the other would be helpful. Because if I could have this, like, the HE and the M, and just have that be part of the text otherwise on here, so that as it starts to glow, it looks like the epitaph has the H and the E in it, and then it fades to say "help me" off of that. Something along those lines would be great. And I think that's just something I need to play around with. Adding the polyurethane did help make the resin less noticeable. It's still a little bit noticeable, and definitely from afar, not at all. So I'm still going to call that a win for right now. But we'll get this one set up and in the yard, and we'll see how it goes for Halloween. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.